1, 2, 3. Welcome everybody, this is How to English, Teach and Learn with Gav and M.
It's a podcast about teaching and learning English as a foreign language.
All opinions stated are personal and references will be given when necessary.
And we're back. It's time for Gav and M's How to English TEFL podcast. Are you ready, M?
I am ready, Gav.
Are you ready, followers?
That's a definite yes.
And what do they need to do while they're enjoying our episode, M? Episode 3.
C.
Season 6.
Season 6. What do you mean, what do they have to do? They have to...
Do they need to actively participate in today's episode? Should they be making notes? Do they need to interrupt us to ask us questions during today's show?
Not if they don't want to, Gav. Does this just reflect who we are as teachers? I would say whatever they want is fine, but it would be nice if they did pay attention, maybe. Yeah, make notes, always good. Interrupt us, how are they going to do that?
I'm not entirely sure, but I thought I'd put it out there just in case.
Well, if you can work out how to do that, followers, I would be a bit scared. But yeah, if you want to interrupt, go ahead. Are you going to interrupt me?
Emails are welcome, of course, if you want to send us some messages.
That's not really an interruption, but yes, just interaction. Maybe we should start with I. No, we're going to go with C, Gav.
And do you want to explain what you mean we're going to go with C?
We're doing C, the C's of EFL.
We're doing C, are we?
Doing C.
Is it time to do C?
We're going through the alphabet of EFL. All the vocabulary that comes to mind when
Probably
we think
not all of it, because we don't have that much time, then.
Some of the vocabulary that comes to mind when we think of C words.
And have you made a list of words beginning with the letter C that you might like to raise today?
I am the list queen, and I have my list, as always.
You're literally lifting up this piece of paper in order to, see it clearly?
Yeah, I'm holding it away from my eyes a little bit. Yes, I can see a lot of C's. Have you got some C's too?
I have got some words beginning with C, some expressions, some stuff that I think you and the followers may enjoy learning about.
So who's going to start?
I'd like to start.
Go on then.
My first C, M, is, of course, C1 and C2 exam tips.
Okay, start off slow and soft, yeah? We'll just dive straight into C1 and C2 exam tips. Have you ever taught a C2 student an exam?
I'm not sure teaching was the right word, but maybe instructing, guiding, and allowing them to impress me with their extraordinary knowledge of English, yes.
It is high level. I've only had one student ever in my many, many years of teaching English, and it was possibly the most intimidating thing, not because of the student, but the exam itself. And I don't know the difference between some of these words that were in the exam. I think one of them was the difference between a rod, a stick, a pole, and there was another one, but I've forgotten what it is now. It's hard. It's hard stuff.
It's extremely difficult, but the students do
know more than us, yes.
I was going to say, they need to know, but you're right, they often do know an awful lot, which is really extraordinary. I've got a little list here, that I'd like to read out to you, and just stop me if there's any details you'd like me to go into on exam strategies for our C1, C2, so that's advanced and proficiency level students.
Right, so this is a bit different from a regular, intermediate level exam. This is a bit higher, so the tips are a bit different. This isn't applicable to all exams.
Well, should we check out these exam tips and decide for ourselves whether they're only applicable to our advanced students, or perhaps, as you implied, they may be useful to every exam student?
Yes, Gav.
My first tip, know the format.
Applicable to every exam, but perhaps with the higher level. No, it's the same. I think it's the same for every exam. You've definitely, as a teacher, got to learn all the stages. As a teacher, you've got to know all the point scoring system.
Surely it's the student that needs to know the exam, not the teacher.
Both, I think, but you need to be able to teach it to the student. But students are coming to you as a teacher to learn these things. If you're teaching an exam course, you really have to know that exam inside and out, and sometimes the point system is quite complicated. and to know how many parts are in each section and the timing of the exam and how long the students have to do all of those things. And then you have to train them to not only understand the exam, but to be able to do it all in that time frame.
It's very true. And so you may spend more time training the student how to do the exam rather than the actual contents of what they may need or may be tested with in the exam.
I think it's everything. It's such an overall skill you've got to teach. And in some exam courses that are quite intensive and quite short, you have to really work out what's the priority. But I would say, yeah, a lot of it is learning the exam for both you and the student and understanding all the parts. But then you do have to up their vocabulary, and you have to maybe go through a few grammar points that are quite tricky.
You could embed that into the activity of teaching the exam, Em.
Yeah, you should.
Time management, that's my second point.
Very important for every exam. I've already mentioned it.
Our third point is read the instructions carefully.
Sounds simple enough, doesn't it? But I've heard some horror stories of students who have only read very briefly or skimmed the instructions and perhaps just gone a bit blank with what you've taught them as a teacher in the lessons, and they've suddenly just forgotten that they've got to do 2 tasks for part 3 instead of 1. So they've spent an hour doing what they thought was 1 task to find out at the end they have to do the second part as well, and they've only got 3 minutes to do it.
One can be quite guilty of not reading instructions very carefully and assuming you know what you need to do because it looked like the other thing you did earlier, and then you find that your table is built upside down.
Your table is built upside down?
For example, like, you read instructions, you put this on top of this, and you screw this thing into here, and then you find you've got 3 legs on your table, there should be 4.
Yeah, that makes more sense. I'd say if a table's upside down, you just turn it over, but whatever. Yeah, definitely read the instructions carefully, more than once, go through it twice, thrice perhaps.
Tip 4, use advanced language naturally.
Easier said than done, but yes, that is the goal, isn't it? To have a natural conversation in the speaking part.
But don't force complex vocabulary or structures. They should fit smoothly into context, Em.
Yeah, that is a tricky one.
You don't want to sound like you've rehearsed for this exam.
No, but clearly everyone does. If you can incorporate these words or phrases in there naturally, well done.
Have a few up your sleeve, but again, don't force them out. Number 5, check your work, Em.
If you have time, that's a luxury, I think, in an exam. But if you have got some time at the end, go back. Do not spend it just relaxing and enjoying the free time. Don't.
Pat yourself on the back and say, well done, I've got 10 minutes left. I'm just going to daydream and look out the window.
That's right. Go back through everything, change anything that doesn't look good, check your spellings, which is sometimes a point gone if you've spelt the word wrong.
I think that fits very well into time management. You should allocate specific amounts of time for each part of the exam, allowing yourself time at the end to go back and check. Look for typical mistakes that you make. Look for, as you said, spelling mistakes, because you will lose points. And think about, can I improve any of those structures?
So when you're teaching this, I think you need to be very aware of this skill that a student needs to be able to identify for themselves. Don't just say, oh, you've made a mistake there, or you've missed the I, or that's not how you spell this word, this is how you spell it. I always try and get students to identify their own mistakes, and if they are not able to see the mistake, at least just highlight the mistake and then ask them what they think's wrong with it. Is it the vocabulary? Is it the spelling? Is it the grammar? I think you can do little codes as well with the written exam. You just have a little code system where you put a letter next to the mistake. So
ABT for tense.
they know exactly if it's a tense problem, because they really need to learn this themselves, because you're not going to be there as a teacher in the exam. You're not going to be holding the hand, so they're going to have to learn it the
That's
hard
definitely
way.
not allowed.
No.
That was my tips for C1/C2 exam students, Em.
Good tips, Gav, but I would also say they're all good for other levels too. C1, C2 exams, possibly the most challenging thing I've ever done. Challenging is also a C word, but I haven't got it on my list, but there's a lot of challenging situations for many, many reasons. Anyway, I'm going to move on to a different word, a different C word. My C word is CCQs, which is 3 words, but what is a CCQ, Gav?
It's a concept checking question. As a teacher, teach something, and then you have to ascertain from your student whether they've comprehended that concept correctly.
Good. Shall we demo this?
I'd rather you didn't.
Why not?
Really bad at CCQs.
Really? We're here to make mistakes, aren't we? We're here to try, safe space and all that.
As long as nobody else is listening, Em, I am up for it.
I think we're okay. I don't know. I hope not. Anyway, I hope there are people out there listening. Let's do it. So do you want to do grammar or vocabulary?
Oh, give me vocabulary. I always struggle teaching vocabulary to my students, Em. It's so complex. You suddenly realise one word can mean 5 different things, and it could mean something different in a different context. You could spell it differently. You might be able to put it in the past or the present in a different form. And I'm getting discombobulated just thinking about it.
Wow, that's a really good word, discombobulated. But we're not going to learn that word today. Followers, if you want to know that word, look it up in your dictionary. I'm going to teach you the word query, Gav.
I can't even spell query.
Query.
It's got far too many U's and E's and I's and other letters that I'm sure don't need to be there.
It doesn't have an I unless it's plural, but give it a go. How do you think you spell query?
Query.
You are right. And if it's plural?
Queries.
You drop the Y and you add IES. Yes, it follows the rules of Y words. So a query is the same thing as a question or an inquiry.
It sounds a bit formal. I'd say question was informal or neutral language, and query sounds a bit more businessy, formal.
You're right there.
A little bit old-fashioned as well.
You are right there. Are you teaching me or am I teaching you? That is good. So we've established it's like a question, but it's a bit more formal and a bit more businessy. I think that was your word. So, can you use it in a sentence?
I have a query.
That is a good sentence. So you could say, I have a query. If you have more than one query, what would it be?
I have several queries.
Nice. Or I have some queries. I have many queries. So, Gav, if I was teaching this, I would say to you, what's a synonym for query?
I would answer an inquiry.
Nice. And I would say, what's the most informal one? Question, query, or inquiry?
A question is the most informal of those 3 words.
Good. So query and inquiry are quite similar business words. And what was the last query you made?
The last query I made was, could you tell me what time the movie is on in your cinema complex, please?
Excellent. So what I've done is I've told you as much as I can about the word query, and then I've checked that you've understood what I've said, and I've even asked you an open question, which means you don't just say yes or no. You just told me about something of your experience.
I gave you an example using the word in context. And was that context okay, Em?
It was perfect.
Because I guess if I made a mistake at that point, you would know that you had taught it incorrectly.
Yes, that's the point of CCQs. And it was a good question and a good answer, because then I can carry on talking, I can personalise it, can ask you more about that. But I think you got the idea of what a query is.
That was a nice CCQ, Em. Thanks for teaching us what a CCQ is. I've got a couple more CCQs for the word query. Would you like to hear them?
I'd love to hear them.
For example, is a query always verbal?
No. It can be emailed, written, text.
Exactly. Can a customer make a query about a product?
Yes, definitely.
Is a query the same as giving an answer?
No, it's the opposite.
Asking for an answer, isn't it?
That's right.
There's some nice CCQs, Em.
Yes, so if you do need AI to help you, there you go. It can do that too.
What are you implying?
Nothing. What's your next word?
I would like to introduce the topic that begins with the letter C, and it's chat-up lines in English.
Have you taught chat-up lines in your lessons?
We have covered them briefly some time ago.
Cool. I've done matchmaking. I think there's something in a book about that. That was good, about character and personality types, and you match the people, but I haven't actually done chat-up lines. I'm sure there's some fun to be had, but also could be a little bit awkward.
I suppose it could. You'd have to check with your students they felt comfortable, but obviously this is only intended for them to practice their vocabulary, grammar, and possibly have a bit of fun at the same time.
Let's have it in context then.
We could also compare them to the students' own chat-up lines. perhaps
Yeah,
that are quite common in their country.
maybe. I feel like we're old-fashioned now. I feel like, do young people even use chat-up lines anymore? I don't know.
Here's a chance to learn some.
This is how you met your mother. Is that what? Is that what we're doing?
I've made an activity for us. I've got 6 questions and they're followed by the 6 answers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read the question to you and then you have to match it with one of these 6 answers. Got them here on paper.
Right. Thanks. I'm holding them.
All right, how many answers you got?
6.
How many questions am I going to ask?
6.
All right, let me start with the first one.
I liked your CCQs there. Thanks.
My first chat up line, M, is do you have a map?
I'm looking at the second part of the sentence. It's, do you have a map because I keep getting lost in your eyes?
Oh, that's a correct answer.
Oh,
Well
it's
done.
so cheesy.
Is it a bit cheesy, that one?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, see if this one's less cheesy. Number 2, are you a magician?
Are you a magician? Not that one. Because whenever I look at you, everyone else disappears. Oh, I like that one. That's quite good.
What structure were we practicing there?
Linking words?
There's some nice linking words.
And
Present simple.
yes, sorry, is that what you mean? Yeah. Present
Facts.
simple, facts, yes.
Now, number 3, is your name Google?
Is your name Google? Because you're everything I've been searching for. Oh, modern one.
That's nice, isn't it?
Very good.
That's nice. I like the way you connected those together. Number 4, are you a time traveller?
Are you a time traveller? Because I can see you in my future.
Oh, that's good. Number 5, do you have sunburn?
Are you always this hot? Oh no, that's terrible.
Is that not a good one?
Don't like that. No.
Avoid that one. Number 6, are you French?
Because I fell for you. I fell for you.
I fell for you? What does that mean?
Eiffel Tower. I fell for you.
The Eiffel Tower, I fell for you. Well, that's a kind of pun, isn't it?
That is a pun. Not sure. Not sure about that one.
That wasn't so good.
Definitely the magician one's my favourite one.
You like that. So, linking words, because, or, present simple. We've got present perfect, I've been searching for. How would you explain that, Em? Is your name Google because you have everything I've been searching for? What grammar are we looking at there and why are we using it, Em?
Present perfect continuous. Up to now. Possibly going to continue. Possibly not. But stress is on the action. Yeah.
I've been searching and searching and searching, and finally, I think I found the one.
And if that person stays around for the answer, I think you're almost in with a shot there.
You think they might just wander off?
Roll their eyes and walk away. Yeah, possibly.
Oh well. Thanks to the not.com, knot.com, for their suggestions of chat up lines, which I think are quite useful for matching exercises in the classroom. Em.
Yeah, it's a nice activity, perhaps. Have a mingling activity. People with half a sentence each walk around, find your match. Not a romantic match.
I was going to say, be careful with that one.
Your sentence match. You never know. I'm sure some relationships have started in the classroom.
What's your next C, M?
My next C, Gav, is confidential.
Like secretive?
Yeah. So if I say confidential in EFL, what comes to your mind?
What happens in EFL stays in EFL.
You mean what happens in the classroom stays in the classroom?
Yeah, so we don't talk about personal things that might come up in the lesson to people outside of that room.
Really? So if your students go home and want to talk to their family and friends about, oh, this happened in my English class, that's no good?
If it's something personal, I'd probably prefer them not to be gossiping to other people.
Yeah, but if somebody comes and volunteers that information, then surely it's public then, isn't it? Unless they specifically say, right, everyone don't tell anybody about this because it's secret. But I would say if somebody's volunteering that in an English lesson environment, then there's no real problem.
You have to judge for yourself. I think some students are not particularly aware of the fact that they're sharing very personal things sometimes. And I think they assume that nobody would talk about that afterwards and elsewhere.
Maybe. Maybe sometimes it's worth, as a teacher, just clarifying, if this is something you want people to talk about or maybe not. And then maybe think about not sharing so much. But yeah, I agree. The atmosphere can feel very comfortable and people just start opening up and then they say things perhaps they don't want to say, they may regret later. So that's something to consider as a teacher.
I always tell students just to make it up if you don't really want to tell us the truth.
I always say the opposite. Don't make it up. Try and tell us something real. But
Well,
then
it might be really personal.
yeah, but if it's something that personal, then I think they should have the option of not discussing it at all.
Question, where were you last week? And they think, I don't think I want to tell you that, but now I feel like I have to because you're a person of authority, even though you're my TEFL teacher.
So how do you know if they're being honest or not, if that's the question?
I don't question their honesty. I just want them to give me a good sentence.
But you're going to ask more questions, aren't you? So if you say, where were you last week? And they say, I was at home. And then you say, well, what were you doing at home? You start to sound like it's an interrogation.
I would look at them, and if they said, I was at home and they're staring at me, I would say, that's great. So what are you doing this week then?
So if their eyes are screaming, please no more questions.
Yes. I have received information from students on the topic that they'd prefer not to talk about certain things.
I have too, yeah. And if that's the case, then of course you wouldn't even ask that question, would you? You would just skip it and say, glad you're back, we missed you, and then you'd move on.
I might not even mention that, Em. I might not even say, where were you last week? Or I'm glad you're here now, because then you're drawing attention to the thing that maybe the student doesn't want to talk about.
And the other students are reminded that they weren't there and maybe they would ask in the break or something. Okay, I don't know about not even acknowledging it, but perhaps depending on what the severity of it was, you could just, move on as if it's not happened. It's a good point, though. I think you have to be careful not to delve too much. And obviously, as teachers, we want our students to talk. We ask them a lot of questions. I find myself sometimes thinking, maybe that was a bit too far. Maybe I shouldn't ask that question. Maybe that was too deep. So it is a very fine line, isn't it? Because they trust you and you may be leading them into something they don't really want to talk about in front of people they don't know very well.
I think they feel the need to be very honest with you, which is sometimes problematic because you don't need them to be honest with you. Again, you just need them to create a really stellar sentence.
Yeah, but if you've got a one-to-one, sometimes that rapport really does work. That's another side of it. Sometimes students want to tell you all these very confidential things. And as a teacher, you're thinking, actually, I don't want to know all this. You know, doctors and...
Family matters.
Yeah, relationships and, the office politics, all this. And, as a teacher, if you teach other people in that company who know that other person, you're sometimes put in a difficult situation where they've told you something about the company or they've said something that you probably shouldn't know, and then you're not able to talk about it and you have to keep thinking, am I okay to discuss this or not?
Or they've shared some very secretive statistics about their company's future strategies. And you think to yourself, I'm not sure I should be looking at this, and I'm definitely not going to remember any of these details.
Yes, you're going to mind wipe yourself because not only are you talking to other people in the company who may not be privy to that information, you're possibly going out to other companies in a similar industry and talking about similar things. And you can't be then, as a teacher, saying, oh, that other company do something similar to you. And
absolutely not.
We have an NDA policy as teachers. What's NDA, Gav?
Non-disclosure agreement.
So it's really important that you understand that as a TEFL teacher. And because you have all this information, it's not for you to go spreading it around.
And it's really important for the student not to spread around any information in their English class, to be honest.
I had to do that today, actually. One of the students got so excited about explaining something that they then shared their screen and started showing me spreadsheets. And I had a group of 8 people and I thought, I'm not sure everybody should be looking at this. So I just checked and said, are you sure this is something you can share with us? And the student said, yes, it's fine. But they may just get carried away and they minimise screens and you see other things like what's on their desktop and photos and stuff like that. And you have to be quite careful.
And the teacher themselves also should think about confidentiality. What are you sharing?
That's
Maybe
true.
You shouldn't be.
That's also true. Be careful what's in your background. If there's personal things, You don't know who these people are sometimes that you're teaching, so you should also protect yourself.
That's it.
Or if you're in the classroom, maybe just be careful about, having your diary open on the table or just things like this. You just don't know who's in there and what their motives are sometimes.
Good topic. My next C letter, I have just fiddled around with to make it start with the letter C.
You can't manipulate the information.
Oh, I totally can. Confusing business buzzwords.
What?
Just put C at the beginning of it.
Confusing business buzzwords.
I've got a few interesting buzzwords because we do come across a lot of buzzwords. What is a buzzword then?
Yeah, I was going to just clarify. Is this like jargon?
Yes, office jargon, buzzwords, phrases that might only be used in that industry. I've written down a few of them. Some of them I might have just invented, and I'd like you to identify the fakes.
Fun. I hope I've taught enough business jargon to know. But the other thing is business jargon is moving fast. There's new ones all the time, so wouldn't be surprised if there's some I don't know.
Should the followers also take notes while they're following?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just take a sip of my coffee first. Oh, did I mention coffee?
You did just then. Are you hinting at something there, Gav?
I was thinking of ko-fi.com/how to English pod.
And if you type that one in to your browser and find out where it goes, and when you get there, send us a drink.
Cheers.
Thanks, Gav. Buy us a coffee or a tea. That would be lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, Gav, let's hear these confusing business buzzwords.
Our first one is let's circle back on that.
Definitely. Very common. I know it. Very familiar with it. Come back to it later.
Let's talk about that later.
We also say put a pin in it, don't we? Let's put a pin in it and come back to it later.
Does tend to just leave the pin in place and we may never return to that thing.
And you think circle back sounds more hopeful?
It sounds a little bit more hopeful to me.
Okay.
Think inside the box.
Inside the box. What we need is more closed thinking. We don't want to be outside the box thinking of innovative, creative things. We want to be inside the box. No, I don't think that's a thing.
Do you think I just made that one up?
I think you made that up.
You are quite right. You've got both correct.
But, I just want to say this idea of outside the box thinking and blue sky thinking, I think sometimes it's called. Sometimes blue sky thinking can be a bit out there, a bit too far. So maybe you do want to bring it back inside the box. I think that could be a new phrase. Let's make it more realistic. Let's be more practical.
This one, we have to run it up the lucky stick.
Don't know that one. I think I've heard run it up the flagpole. I think the lucky stick isn't anything. But yes, running it up the flagpole meaning let's try it out. Let's see if it works.
Test an idea and see if people approve of it, like raising a flag to see if anyone notices or salutes our flag in.
Yeah, sounds like it comes from some sort of military background, doesn't it?
Now, you got it. That was a fake one. We're not going to run anything up the lucky stick, but we will run it up the flagpole. Next one, is let's take this offline.
I think that is quite a new one, obviously, because now we're working online a lot and we are having meetings on digital platforms. So take it offline means let's talk face to face. Let's maybe have a conversation without everybody else.
It does mean that is let's discuss this privately or outside the current meeting.
So it doesn't have to be offline. It doesn't have to be face to face.
No, I think it just means
me and you together.
Not here at this moment with all these people. Maybe it's a confidentiality issue again.
Right, I'm not as familiar with that one. Okay.
How about this confusing business phrase? Move the needle.
Move the needle. I know move the goalposts is when you change the criteria, usually in an unfair way, but move the needle, it does sound like legitimate business speak.
It is definitely a real buzzword, but it's used to describe making progress or creating a noticeable impact on something, typically in a measurable way. Imagine you've got a gauge or some sort of scale reading implement or device, and you maybe connect your two electrodes to it and you see the needle quivering up and down. Okay. You are getting a response. So maybe it's a metaphor for the customers like this product, it's moving the needle.
You'd use it like that. We are moving the needle with this product.
Yeah, I think so.
The needle is moving. Yeah.
Getting a lot of movement on this.
So there's some life in it?
Yeah,
That
that's
kind of
nice.
thing?
Yeah.
Right. That was a new one for me.
I'll give you another one. Let's touch cake on this.
Cake. I'd love to touch cake on this. No, Gav, I think it's touch base on this.
Touching base. We're not touching cake.
We're not. I'd love to touch cake more often.
Really sticky fingers
You
in touch
would.
cake.
That's nice, though, because then you can lick all the icing off.
Oh, actually, that does sound nice.
But I think, yeah, touch base comes from baseball, making contact. Let's talk about it later. Let's connect.
Synergy.
Synergy is definitely a business phrase or business buzzword. I'm not exactly sure what it means. Isn't it just working together in harmony?
That's exactly it. Working together for a greater combined result.
I think one of my students said we need to align our ideas the other day, and I thought, wow, that's a great sentence. So, yeah, similar to that.
Like alignment.
Or in life generally.
In reality, synergy doesn't actually mean very much at all, but it does kind of mean working together, yes.
Sounds good.
I've got two more for you, Em. We need to leverage our core competencies.
Yeah, this is another one that's definitely used. Leverage. Again, I'm not exactly sure what it means, but it's like use it to our advantage. Is that right?
It is, and these are specifically our skills. So let's use what we're good at. If your company is very good at selling umbrellas, don't try and sell washing machines. Just sell umbrellas because that's what you're good at.
Right. So it's literally like having a lever to move something that's difficult to move, so you get under it and you can actually pick it up easily and make it move.
Are you leveraging right now, Em?
Yeah, I am doing that action. I think it helps to have these visual ideas like touch base. I do think about someone running round a baseball baseball field, and literally touching the base, and that's how it helps. And a lot of my students need these connecting ideas.
I like that picture you just created.
Thanks. Last one.
Let's not reinvent the rain.
Reinvent the rain isn't right. I think it's reinvent the wheel, because it's already perfect. You can't improve on it. It's the optimum design, isn't it?
Still working on that, Em.
Are they? Okay. Well, they are reinventing the wheel, but the phrase "let's not reinvent the wheel" is, I think, a bit like if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Kind of.
I think some people say if it's not broke, don't fix it.
If something is already perfect or already very, very good, then don't spend time trying to make an even better one. Just focus on something else that needs fixing.
Gav, I like those. Fun ways to talk about business jargon. My last C word, Gav, is culture. Culture. Culture shock, perhaps. Cultural differences. Culture is something that an EFL teacher will experience. And maybe that's one of the reasons people want to get into EFL. Definitely was one of the reasons I got into EFL, because I wanted to meet people from different cultures. At that time, I wanted to travel to different countries. And it is a fabulous way to learn about a culture. Now I'm working from home online, and also because I'm working with business people, it's more of a cultural difference, trying to understand why there is confusion, why there is misunderstanding between cultures, mainly because of their business style and the way they
do business,
the way they communicate as well. Some cultures are more direct than other cultures. So culture for me started as something I wanted to experience in a more
tangible way.
Yeah, great
Feel
way.
it, touch it, taste it, smell it, walk through it, and wash your hands afterwards.
Step in it, all of that, yes. That was what I wanted, and that's what I got, definitely, for the first 10 years. Now I'm dealing with it in a more conceptual way, let's say, and it's great. It's great for that reason as well. There's
a virtual way.
Yes, definitely virtual. There's many aspects to culture, and I deal with it all the time. Even sitting in my home country, I am still experiencing a lot of culture.
In your little office at home, you're still able to communicate and learn about other people's culture online.
Which is why I love this job. And what I said, my core reason was really about helping people communicate, which is my other big C word that I'm going to just drop in there. Communication and culture. Those two things together, for me, are EFL in a nutshell.
Is culture a boundary, or is it a path taking us to somewhere even more interesting? Should we take our culture with us, Em, or should we leave it behind in the suitcases that we didn't bring?
As teachers?
As travellers in the world, whether we're travelling from our offices virtually online or whether we're travelling across the world to see and explore new places, do we take our culture with us or should we leave it behind?
That's a very big question, Gav. I think we have to take it with us to some extent. We are who we are. We can't change that.
We're created by our culture.
Yeah, everyone is. So you can't drop it like a...
Chris Packet.
Don't litter. Definitely don't do that. No, but you can't just get rid of it.
People expect you to bring it with you to the class. Maybe your teacher should bring some of their culture and your students should bring some of their culture.
That would be good, wouldn't it? If it was equal, that would be nice.
A meeting of cultures.
And that is also something as a TEFL teacher that we have to think about. Are we pushing our culture onto people? Do they want more of our culture? Is that the reason they signed up to the course?
Do they want to share their culture with us, the teacher?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions with that. And sometimes the answer is no, they don't. Sometimes they don't want any of that. They just want to learn English.
How can you learn English without having culture involved?
You just keep it simple, I think. You go to the books, you look at the neutral language. I don't know if every student wants the cultural experience.
I'm not sure that's really possible. And when I'm teaching polite phrases and my students say, I would not say this in my language because it sounds wrong, I say, I just can't go up to somebody in the street and say, what's the time? I have to say, excuse me, can you tell me what the time is?
That also depends on where you're from. That's not universal in all English-speaking countries. Some English-speaking countries are more direct than others, so...
Well, that's where I'm bringing my culture in.
You are right. Everything is heavily laden with culture. I think it's a big topic, definitely, and there's lots of aspects to it. How much do you want to go into today?
I think we've covered a little, and we've raised some nice questions for our followers to also think about the answers.
Yeah, we've just scratched the surface of that one, I think.
Have you prepared anything for the final part of the show where we give teaching and learning tips to our followers?
I have, Gav. And my tip today is...
Does it begin with a C?
It, of course, begins with a C. My tip is don't make things overly complicated.
I thought you were going to say complicated then.
Why?
Just the way that you paused when you said overly...
Goes together well, doesn't it?
It's a good collocation.
Overly complicated. And I was definitely guilty of this as a beginner teacher. I sometimes spent hours learning the grammar and then teaching it in a way that was so complicated that I felt like I had to tell the students every single part of it. I took a photo once of the notes that I'd written on the board at the end of the lesson, and it was literally full of grammar, construction, verb, participle, conjugation. It was overwhelming. It was like 4 pages of an English grammar book.
It sounds absolutely incredible.
It was impressive.
Do you think it reflected your fascination in grammar and your realisation of just how deep grammar can go?
Totally did.
And then did you reflect afterwards and think maybe the students didn't need to go nearly as deep as I went?
Took a lot longer than it should have taken for me to get to that point where I realised. But I think sometimes less is more. And now I realise they don't need all of that. They need the basic concept. They need a few examples.
Examples are really useful.
And they need a lot of practice. I definitely don't overwhelm my students now with all the pre-teaching. And if they need more help in the practice stage, then we may go back and do a bit more form, a bit more structure. But I find a lot of the time they do just pick it up just from a one-sentence example, and they're very capable. So I think they get bored with it. If it's these lengthy explanations of grammar, they've already studied a lot of it before anyway, and if it is something new, I think they are able to pick it up quite well. That's my tip. Don't overcomplicate things.
Keep it simple.
And that goes for a lot of other things. Explanations, keep them as short as you can. Instructions for tasks. Don't just give a monologue of instructions. That's my tip.
My teaching and learning tip for the end of episode 3, letter C, season 6 of Gavin M's How to English Pod is control. Now, what do I mean by control? That is a very good question. Control could be, from the teacher's point of view, don't be too controlling. Give some empowerment to your students.
Very good. And that's, again, similar to the complicated thing. I definitely took too much control in my early days. I felt like I had to steer the ship, and if I didn't have my hand on that
Steering wheel?
steering wheel on a ship, I don't know. If I didn't have my hands on that, let's say it's like driving a car, I was driving the car, if I didn't have my hands on the steering wheel at all times, we were going to crash.
Your students in the back, like little kids.
Yeah, totally. And I shouldn't have been in that position. I can't even drive, Gav. I haven't got a licence. So
But you have got a teaching license, which is pretty cool.
yeah, that's true. Actually, that doesn't work as a good metaphor, but I agree with you. And sorry, I'm just talking now. So you talk about control.
That was it.
I'm taking too much control.
Clearly, I'm trying to say
Doing
complete
it
control.
now.
But I was just going to say, just give students more control. Say to them, is there anything you want to do? Make some lists of things students want to do. Then next time, do the things the students want to do and make sure that they are doing what they want to do in the way that they want to do it, a way that they're fully engaged, that they're not just listening to you, as you say, with your long monologues of boring information.
Yep.
But are they interacting? Are they
Having input.
having input in the lesson? Are they participating fully in that activity, in that session with you? Will they leave and think, I really contributed to that lesson. I really like that.
I agree. And they don't even have to bring the topics or bring the tasks. I think
It does help when they do, Em.
Of course it does. But even if you let them take control of the way that the book is presented. The other day, it just occurred to me, instead of saying to my students every lesson, and how are you? And how are you, student B? And how are you, student C? I just said, right, I always do the how are yous. I'm going to let you do the how are yous at the beginning of this lesson. And I've only done it ever once. I've done it once in my whole teaching career. Just let them do it. And they were brilliant at it.
Well, they've done it so many times with you, Em. I suppose they will.
Well, they've heard me do it, but for them to actually ask each other the questions, and not just how are you, but the follow-up questions, you've got to make it clear. You can't just ask how are you and that's the end of it. But it's just a skill that they need to practice. And if you don't let them do that at the beginning of the lesson because you think this is just the small talk and it's not important, they're never going to have practice of doing it in real life. So I think I should do it more often. And I probably should just say, right, from now on, that's your job. I'm not doing it anymore. You've heard it enough times. You know how to do it. Off you go.
And also set aside some time at the end or in the middle of the lesson where the students get a chance for them to freely talk or freely write or freely express themselves however they want to, so that they're really practicing in a real way. It's the chance for them to work on their own, to think on their own, to express themselves on their own without the teacher's control.
Yeah, I think it took a long time for me to get to that point. But now I'm there, I can do a lot less. And I'm happy for that. And my students are happy for that too.
And you might get more results, Em.
That's the irony. You kind of step back and realise they get a lot more out of it when you do that. I used to feel that I needed to give them so much of me for them to get anything out of it. But it's not always the case.
That is not always the case, Em, and that is where we will leave today's episode. That case will be left exactly where it is. Is it open or closed? Is it locked or unlocked? That's the mystery. We will never know.
I have no idea what you're talking about right now.
Are there any topics that we didn't cover in today's C episode?
Yes, Gav, of course. There are so many C's in the EFL world. We haven't talked about classrooms. We haven't talked about confidence, which is really important. Creativity. What about children, Gav? Teaching children.
That is a massive part of EFL that we completely neglected to give ourselves enough time for in this episode, Em.
We also didn't have time to talk about the communicative approach, curriculum, context. Context is so important. And also correction, Gav. We didn't talk about correction.
Well, what a pity, because those are really, really good topics, but we just didn't have enough time. I also wanted to talk about creating engaging lessons and confidence in speaking, Em. Plus, of course, we neglected to cover the topic of Cockney rhyming slang, but episode 3, letter C, is sadly disappearing.
Yes, unfortunately, the letter C is concluding, Gav.
Catch you next time.
Ciao, Gav.
Ciao for now.